Hello and welcome to episode 50 of Handgun Radio. I'm your host, Ryan Machad from the wild woods of central Maine, and this is your home for all the news, information, and discussion in the handgunning world. This week, it's the 50th episode of Handgun Radio, so Weer'd Beard and I will discuss the various 50 caliber handguns and cartridges that are out there. As always, this show is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network, and Brownells helps make Handgun Radio possible. Selection, service, and satisfaction. Find it all at Brownells. If you're doing any shopping with Brownells, please use our affiliate link, handgunradio.com/Brownells, to help support the show. So, episode 50, my wife made me a sign. Listeners obviously can't see that, but there it is. Set it right on top of a case of beer, so thank you to my wife for the sign and the beer. And so, Weird, how you doing this week? Episode 50.
Yeah, big show.
You've been on quite a few of the episodes here recently, helping to contribute, so I really appreciate it. Well,
I appreciate being on.
So, going to a little week in review here. So, what'd you do this week, Weird?
So, I finally got out to go shooting. It's been an absolute while with the baby around. It's not a whole lot of time that I have to go pull triggers. Plus, the ammo shortage it's really changed things. So I decided to go out and just get down to basics, and I brought my 22 revolvers along, and that's my opinion. That's one of the best guns for just getting the basics back together. Get a nice long double action trigger pull, and plus my 617 is just a real sweet revolver. So took that out and cranked some of the rust off my skill sets, and found that things hadn't deteriorated too bad. I wasn't ripping the X out of the target, but I was scaring it pretty good. And also brought my Ruger LCR 22, because that's just a slick little 22 revolver as well, and had fun with that. Also my Beretta 21A, because come on, man, it's just an awesome gun. If you don't have a Beretta 21A, you got to go out and get one, because they're just awesome. And also I had a couple of guns that I had bought actually before my daughter was born, and I had shot these guns because they belonged to a friend of mine, JG of the Squirrel Report and his various blogs and endeavors. And he when he moved to Virginia, he sold off a bunch of his guns, and I picked out two that I really wanted. One of them was a Smith & Wesson M&P 9C, because I'd always wanted one of those. And the other one was a North American Arms mini revolver and 22 long rifle. And so shot the 9C, and it shot as expected. It's a boringly accurate and good gun, so that was awesome. And then I shot the NAA, and I got to ask you, Ryan, you've got one of those. How the heck do you shoot these things? I tried a bazillion different ways of holding on to that gun, but there's not a lot to hold on to, and so I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but
I use you have is it factory wood grips on it, or is it that folding clip grip?
I've got the clip grip, but I haven't put it on the gun.
The factory wood grips is what I have on mine, and basically what I do is I hold most of the grip with just my index finger, and I brace the bottom of it on my ring finger, and I take the edge of my thumb, and after I've cocked the gun, I hold it over the top edge, because there's quite a protrusion from that grip, that grip panel.
Yep.
And I use my thumb to put a little pressure on that grip panel on the top of it and try to keep the muzzle down. And then I just basically, honestly, with that gun at like maybe 5 to 10 feet, I'm usually just keeping the top of the gun just so I just see the blade and nothing else. And that's the way I found to hit with it. There's a little quote-unquote notch on the back of it, but if you aim like that, you're going to be shooting wicked low.
Yep. Well, yeah, no, I was trying different things of like squeezing both sides of the grip and not really worrying about too much front-to-back pressure and all sorts of stuff. And sometimes it would flip up real high after the shot broke, and other times it was on paper with all of them, but on paper, that's about as best as I could say.
Right. Let me put it this way. Even with like the grips I've found that have worked the best, and I've shot that gun a lot. I mean, I've put probably close to 1,000 rounds through that gun over the course of the time I've owned it. And 90% of the time, it always flips up like that, no matter how tight you hold it. It's just a nature, I think, of the grip shape, and it's just so small that it just has a lot of muzzle flip to it. Now, how did you? What loads were you using in that gun? Because I found mine's pretty particular when it comes to accuracy with specific loads. But I want to hear what you used.
I was just using my. I'm trying to think if I had. What I had with me was I've got my go-to ammo that I happen to have a couple of bricks squirreled away from before it all disappeared. It was just the Federal. I don't even know what the name of it is, but just the big red brick of Federal, not the bulk pack, but the little individual. I think there's 40 rounds in it or 50 rounds in each little box, but it's just a brick with the different boxes in it. And but yeah, no, that's so I wasn't shooting consistently enough to say anything about accuracy.
Like you said, it's pretty much minute of like paper. I mean, you could usually keep them pretty close to being all on like a piece of printer paper, but you're not getting groups with these guns at all.
No.
But the thing is, I've noticed that when I used CCI Stingers, those were keyholing, and I think the lighter bullet is just not being stabilized in that short, tiny barrel. I'm not sure why. It looked like it. I mean, because I was using just like standard velocity bulk pack stuff, and that was shooting pretty much dead on. I mean, I got the best groups with that, much better than I did with the high velocity stuff.
Yeah, no, I had that, and I had some, what were they, Remington Yellow Jackets or something like that, some crappy Remington loads that weren't all that special, but somebody, when I was buying that Ruger LCR 22, the guy behind the counter went, "Hey, you want some 22 for this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, what do you got?" And of course he turned to me and said, "You're buying a revolver, what do you care?" And
right.
So
Well, the thing is, sometimes it makes a difference too, though, because to get that higher velocity, they drop down the bullet weight like a few grains, and in some guns that can make all the difference.
Yeah, and so the other thing that I did after I got back from the range and cleaned everything up was I finally decided I had the baby off in daycare for the day, and decided, oh, I've got the house all to myself. Now would be a good time for me to take this darn magazine disconnect out of the gun. And I'm not a guy for detail stripping guns. As soon as the little fiddly parts start falling out of the gun, I break into a cold sweat. But yeah, I got it out, and I used a pen from a spring from a ballpoint pen to shim the sear disconnector back in, and that took a bit of work and a bunch of actually I ended up using just a pair of eyebrow tweezers to compress the spring and slide it into that little teeny tiny slot, because it just was turning around sideways and all that. But once I got the pin in place, it was all good, and then got everything back into place, and ta-da, it worked good. And I looked at my watch and went, oh, geez, I got enough time to head down to the range. So I did the bare minimum. I loaded up just one magazine of 10 rounds and hopped in my car and drove back to my gun club, and just pretty much took the magazine, put it in the gun, racked around into the chamber, dropped the magazine onto the bench, fired off that round, and rinsed and repeated for 9 more rounds, and every single one of them went off, so I feel pretty good about my job.
Now, how do you feel with the comparing the LCR to your 617 in terms of like trigger pull and stuff like that?
I mean, you really can't compare them, because the LCR, that's one of the few guns that I bought brand new just because I really, really wanted one, and they're not showing up. They're so new that they're not showing up in the used racks yet. So it's a brand spanking new from the factory gun, but I mean the trigger pull's really nice on them. But that 617, I've probably got 10,000 rounds through it, and that's a used gun, so that trigger's been pulled a whole bunch of times, and especially after I got it back from Smith & Wesson, I think they cleaned off all the small parts, so any little dirt and grit and steel shavings and whatnot that were inside the lock work, all cleaned off. The trigger pull on that gun is ridiculous, so you really can't compare the two, just because that gun's been so broken in that everything just slides like butter. But the LCR's got a real good trigger pull, and you can stage it up real nice, and I mean, I was hitting just as accurately with that little teeny tiny gun as the 617.
I was just curious because I know there's a marked difference between the J-frame guns and the K-frame guns in terms of trigger pull, and I was wondering if that unique trigger design that the LCR series uses made any difference in terms of, the different frame sizes.
it definitely makes a huge difference between like a Smith like a new out of the box Smith & Wesson J frame and a new out of the box LCR. The trigger pull difference is really noticeable. It's a really nice smooth trigger pull. And just so you know, the Model 17 is indeed a K frame, but the 617 is actually an L frame revolver. It's a little bit bigger. Yeah, no, it's a if you hold it right beside a 686, you can't tell them apart except for the fact that there's like a million little flutes in that cylinder.
Right. Excellent. Well, hopefully anybody who is looking to get one of those LCR 22s now is a little bit more influenced to do so. So we're going to move into the main topic, which is going to be 50 caliber handguns. So this week, in honor of episode 50, we're talking about 50 caliber handguns, but we're probably going to stick with the various 50 caliber cartridges rather than trying to look at all the specific guns first and then, talk about what they're chambered in, because a lot of guns are, cross-chambered, like you had some of these single-action revolvers that can chamber, 500 Wyoming Express, 500 Maximum, and 500 Line Boss. So we'll talk about the cartridges themselves and then some of the guns that will chamber them. So we'll probably start off with the most well-known one in terms of longevity, or at least in modern times, longevity being what it is. I mean, still quite a fairly long life now. The 50 Action Express, better known as the 50 AE. So it was developed in 1988 by Evan Wilden of Action Arms, and it was specifically invented for the Desert Eagle. It's got a similar overall case size as a 44 Magnum, but it's a little bit, well, actually quite a bit more powerful. The rim diameter of the 50 AE is the same as that as the 44 Magnum, so conversions between the two calibers in this one gun is fairly simple. A few other pistols and rifles are chambered for this, but overall the Desert Eagle is pretty much the primary pistol. So I've heard you talk about having a little bit of experience with the 44 Magnum one, so have you seen any of the 50s, Weer'd?
I mean, I've seen them in like store shelves and stuff like that, but I've never actually touched one off. And I don't know if I was to ever get a Desert Eagle, which is on the 12th of never, I'd probably get one in 44 Magnum just because you can walk into any Walmart and gun shop and just pick up 44 Magnum, while the 50 AE is still a pretty darn scarce round.
Well, and isn't it a rebated rim?
Yeah, it's a rebated rim, and it's actually the only rimless cartridge that the Desert Eagle will chamber and fire. So it's actually is a true semi-auto cartridge, while everything else the Desert Eagle shoots is a revolver cartridge.
Right, and when we talk about rebated rim, that means basically that the body of the case is larger than the rim itself. So if you were to set it on its side, it would look like a really small base with this progressively just larger bullet right above it. So it's not, like you traditionally see the rims extend past the case body if you're looking at it from the back side. So one of the interesting things, though, is when it was originally introduced in the United States, the 50 AE Desert Eagle was fine legally with traditional rifling because anything over 50 caliber, and I believe has to be semi-automatic, can be considered a destructive device by the ATF. When the ATF tested the gun with polygonal rifling, the gauge plug they were using to drop into the barrel fell completely through, which rendered the pistol a destructive device. So the company redesigned the 50 AE slightly and added a slight taper to the round to allow for a slightly smaller bullet that wouldn't cause the Desert Eagle to be considered a destructive device with polygonal rifling. And I didn't know that when I was looking at the article, the information for this show tonight, but yeah, it was almost a destructive device.
Yeah, no, I hadn't heard about that either, and I used to be pretty geeky on Desert Eagles before I really got into shooting majorly. Then once I shot one, I'm not so geeky about them anymore.
So the rest of these ones that we're going to talk about, aside from one, I believe, tonight, are all chambered in revolvers, just mainly because revolvers tend to handle powerful cartridges better, and you don't have to worry about the various recoil mechanics of a semi-automatic firearm, and calibrating if it's a gas operated firearm, calibrating gas port pressure, stuff like that. So you see a lot, and also having a magazine fed thing with a cartridge that is almost an inch long kind of makes the grip a little bit big to hold on to. So a lot of these rounds go better with revolvers than they do semi-autos, but So the next one we're going to talk about just real quickly is it's a custom round, and it's the 500 GNR. And there is a link in the show notes to show you an image because it's a very unique round. It's a custom caliber designed by Gary Reeder. He's a custom revolver smith. The 500 GNR uses a 350 grain bullet, 50 caliber, coming out of the revolver at 1250 feet per second. So this is a pretty beefy round. Gary Reeder has a huge line of various Wildcat cartridges that he does. He does custom revolvers, mainly single actions, and then I believe his son does custom semi-autos as well. But he does custom rifle cartridges, handgun cartridges, and this is just one that he has come up with. And I've seen videos online. One of his revolvers that was using this round, and it was pretty significant recoil, but looked like it had really great performance. So moving on from that, and this is one that Weer'd, you said you've had quite a bit of experience with. Well, quite a bit. I mean, more than I have, because I've had exactly one time I fired one of these, the 500 Smith & Wesson. Yep.
It's one of the Massachusetts legal pistols, and it's one of the Massachusetts legal 50s. So, yeah, no, you go to a big shoot around here, and there's usually one or two of them that show up. They're fairly popular, especially given how big and expensive they are. You know, they're chambered off the Smith & Wesson X frame, so it's a gigantic. I call it a cartoon gun because it's just really, really, really just you don't realize quite how big one is until you pick one up, and it's really huge, and that cylinder is just a great big block of steel. And allegedly, Smith & Wesson built this thing up. They're not. What I've heard is they're fairly tight-lipped about how much pressure they put through the gun in testing it, but supposedly they put a lot of power behind that just to make sure that they were building the gun strong enough. And it's really, really, really powerful. The factory loads are thereabouts of like 45, 70 power level when you look at it. I mean, the bullet tends to be going a bunch faster, but and it's faster burning powder. So I would imagine if you had a 45-70 revolver, it'd be a little bit easier to shoot than one of these. I also put a link to a friend of mine's webpage where he does custom hand loads for his 500 Magnum, and this guy's an absolute wild man when it comes to loading them. I mean, he's got, all the way up to, he's got a load for a 700 grain bullet going at 1,150 feet per second. So that's absolutely amazing. And with that sort of shooting, you've also got to remember you're experiencing also the torque of the bullet going down the rifling. So the gun's actually going to twist in your hand from just that huge bullet with all that power behind it going down the rifling. The biggest I ever shot of his is the 12-gauge duplication load, which is 440 grain lead flat point with gas check, which that amounts to an ounce of lead, and it's going at 1,300 feet per second out of a 4-inch barrel. And I got shooting it, I fired one off and went, geez, that's got a lot of pep to it, but isn't too bad. So I ended up firing about 15 of them, and the next week my hand was my right hand was completely useless.
That is crazy. I'm looking online at his website, and he has a picture of he calls them the Tyrannosaurus thumpers.
That's actually the brand name.
Oh, it is? Okay. That's that 700 grain Ranger Rick's Tyrannosaurus thumpers. It uses, I think, 25 grains of WC-820. Once or twice fired mixed Hornady or CBC or Starline brass, large rifle primers, and an extra strong roll crimp. Now you're looking at this bullet. It's got 4 lube grooves and then the crimp groove, which I'm sure you need. And it is pictured next to a 45 ACP cartridge, and it's bigger than the 45 ACP cartridge. So that kind of gives you an idea of the size of the bullet that's coming out of this thing.
Yeah, and also, so it's essentially a wad cutter. I mean, it's just a big old soup can of lead, and but it's not loaded like a traditional wad cutter, which is flush with the muzzle. It's loaded like a conventional, bullet-shaped bullet, where I mean that flat point is going all the way out to the end of the cylinder. And according to his load notes, the load notes, he only loads them 1 or 2 at a time because the recoil is so intense that no matter how much crimp he puts on them, the rounds will jump the crimp and bind the cylinder. And so
well, yeah, I mean, you're using all the available cylinder chamber space and everything. I mean, that's crazy. Even looking at where the crimp groove is, he has got still. I mean, it looks like almost another half-inch of bullet.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's a lot of it's a lot of bullet, and it's a fairly dangerous load if you are an inexperienced hand loader. So yeah, if you go and read his website, don't go immediately diving in and go and buying go and buying the components to load up your own, because, I mean, he really is super I tease him for being crazy, but he's anything but. He's a very, very experienced hand loader. He actually now teaches hand loading classes for the Gun Owners Action League of Massachusetts, and very, very experienced. Does a lot of work to look for overpressure signs and all of that. And essentially, a lot of these crazy loads, he's using virgin brass or once fired brass, and then once they've been fired a few times with the crazy stuff, he then loads them up for his lighter loads until the end of their service life, which I'm not exactly sure how many reloads he gets out of them before he scraps the brass. But again, you've got to be very, very, very careful when loading probably any of these loads, because it's just they're such big bullets, and all of them we're talking about here are fairly powerful rounds. So you've got to be very cautious with hand loading them.
Well, and that's probably one thing we should touch on real quickly here, especially with the reloading discussion. These rounds, they're not they're not factory rounds that you're going to find a lot of. I know, like Buffalo Bore, the smaller boutique manufacturers may put out some of these rounds with pretty hefty loads, but the majority of these are pretty much, if you're going to shoot them in any volume, they're going to be hand loading propositions, because these are just, not your factory standard round. Not everybody is shooting 500 Linbaugh. So, I mean, you may probably have to be a reloader if you're going to be getting into any of these larger 50 caliber rounds. Some of the advantages to that, though, as opposed to some of the smaller pistol rounds that have higher pressures, some of these 50 cal rounds don't operate at all that high of a pressure. I mean, some of them do, but some of them don't, and that can mean increased case life too. So, there are some trade-offs depending upon what the cartridge is. Stuff like the 50 GI that we're going to talk about next, is that a commercially available round? Is that pretty much a reloading-only proposition? I
believe Gun Crafters Industries will sell you it, but I think they're the only ones making it. There might be a few. I haven't seen much of it anywhere. This is really just kind of an oddity that I found online and read up on. So yeah, so the 50 GI, it was created for their number one, the Gun Crafters Industries number one 1911 pattern pistol. So it's essentially a 1911, but it's a little bit bigger because they have a conversion kit. When you buy the number one, you can also get a conversion kit that converts it over to 45 ACP, but that has to be with their 50 GI guns. You can't go and, if you've got a Springfield Armory or a Colt, you can't go and buy the 50 GI magazine and recoil spring and barrel and drop it in, because it just won't fit. It's got a rebated rim, so it's got essentially a 45 ACP head on it, and so it's a pretty severe rim taper if you look at the pictures of the round. And it's about 44 Magnum power level. I think it's pushing a 300 grain bullet down range. And I just found it was an interesting thing that somebody decided to scale up a 1911 to 50 caliber. Also, they have conversion kits available for your Glock 20 and Glock 21s, where essentially you're getting an entire new upper onto the gun, so a new slide and barrel and recoil spring and all of that business. And it actually, since the round is so fat, it actually turns the gun from a double stack into a single stack.
I remember reading about a conversion they reviewed in one of the gun magazines a long time ago. They did a Glock with the 50 GI conversion, and they were showing these things, and the hollow points are just massive. They're like caverns.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool gun. If it was a little more common, and the 50 GI wasn't like $3,000, I might think about getting one, but nah.
Well, I mean, and that's good, though, because you think about it, like the ability to convert between that and 45 ACP with basically just a top end swap is really cool, especially if you don't want to have one gun dedicated just to 50.
Yep, and with the actual 50 GI, I mean the Gun Crafters Industry #1, all you're swapping out is the barrel and the recoil spring and the magazine, if I remember correctly, because since it's got the 45 ACP head size, the extractor and the breech face are interchangeable.
Excellent. So that is the last semi-auto round that we're going to be talking about today. The rest of them are going to be the rest of the 50 caliber cartridges are going to be coming out of revolvers. So the 500 Linebaugh, depending upon how you pronounce it, it's an absolutely massive and hard-hitting round. Now it uses a .348 Winchester case as the parent brass. Trim it down to 1.405 inches, and the rim thickness is trimmed as well. Now, the case mouth is opened up to accept a .510 inch bullet. The 500 Linebaugh shoots a 400 grain jacketed hollow point bullet at about 1,400 feet per second out of a very stout single action revolver, most always of a Ruger design. Hamilton Bowen, the guy we talked with, the pistol smith we talked with back in episode 48, has made a lot of guns in 500 Linebaugh, and I believe he did a Ruger Red Hawk double action in 500 Linebaugh, and there's some videos online of him shooting it, and the recoil just sends the gun pretty much up and over your head. It's a crazy round, and I've seen some people fire it at the range, and it's just, and they were hand loaders too. To get the best performance out of this cartridge, I really think you really have to be a hand loader. It was developed by John Linebaugh of Maryville, Missouri in 1986. He had been converting 45 Colt 6-shooters to 5-shot revolvers, giving him a stronger cylinder, which would withstand the higher pressure of 45 Colt ammunition that he had loaded way above maximum. When his venture was successful, he continued to search for a more powerful cartridge, which eventually resulted in the 500 Linebaugh. Have you ever heard of this, Weer'd?
I have heard of it, yeah. No, it's a really, really stout cartridge. And actually, to go off on a little bit of a tangent, that's another thing. You're talking about the recoil pointing the gun straight up in the air. Another thing you'll see, it's most often with the 500 Smith & Wessons, just because they're really common. But you'll actually see people essentially have a double. I don't know if you call it a double feeder, but you'll have guns double on them, and the mechanics behind that is if you don't have a good strong grip on that gun, you'll pull that trigger back. The gun will discharge, and it'll press back into your hand and twist in your hand enough that your finger is going to be pressed out far enough to reset the trigger, but you haven't actually reset the trigger, so you're still squeezing, and so then your finger continues to squeeze, and a second round will go off, usually pretty close to straight up in the air, and that can be a pretty scary proposition. So again, none of these guns are for beginners. You got to make sure that you've got really, really good form with them. If you've got a really good form, you can probably handle just about anything on this. It might hurt you, but it's not going to be dangerous.
Well, and the other thing to note is you'll see people will wonder, well, why are all these rounds mostly chambered in single-action style revolvers? With a grip frame like the Smith & Wesson double-action revolvers, a lot of that recoil is directed more straight back, whereas the single actions that shoot the larger calibers tend to roll in your hand. And I've had single-action 44 Magnums, roll back so much where the hammer is into the web of my hand. But it seems like, I don't know, I've always felt that the recoil with the single action with the larger calibers is a lot more comfortable than the recoil with something like the Ruger Red Hawk. The Red Hawk just slams the palm of my hand.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I also know that I've seen articles written on people that shoot heavy bore revolvers, and one thing they also talk about is instead of having a real strong support grip with your support hand, just hold on tight to it. But once the recoil goes, let that gun slip out. Let your firing grip slip out of your support hand, and let the barrel rise up to eat up some of that recoil in a vertical fashion.
Right. And one of the interesting things about the 500 Linebaugh, there was a time when .348 Winchester cases started running out because it's not a very, highly commercial cartridge. There's not many people who shoot that anymore. And so John Linebaugh began working on the .475 Linebaugh, which could be formed from the more available .4570 government cases. But then a few years later, Winchester reintroduced one of their rifles in .348 Winchester, and the cases started coming back more into the market. So, moving on to our next one, it's the 500 Wyoming Express. Now, this one is one of the newer ones we have here, and it's a one done by Freedom Arms in 2005 for use in their Model 83 revolver. Now, if you're not familiar with Freedom Arms, they make some really high-quality single-action revolvers. They're more of a boutique manufacturer. They make their guns more of a piece-by-piece basis rather than a large-scale manufacturing. And it's pretty much comparable to the 50 Action Express, but it has some higher powder loads and a lower velocity than the 50 Action Express. It's not quite as powerful as the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum. It's typically using anywhere from a 350 grain Hornady XTP at 831 feet per second, all the way up to a 440 grain flat-nose gas jet bullet doing about 1450 feet per second. So it has quite a wide range. Most of the guns we're talking about usually just shoot the heavier bullets, but this one's also a belted Magnum, so it has a small belt of brass that's at the base of the bullet to help reinforce the spot where case head separations are most common between the body of the case and the actual case head itself. So, have you ever seen any of these, Weird? I know these are pretty custom handgun.
Never even heard about it. I mean, I know about the Freedom Arms stuff. Seen him in. I'm pretty sure that was what James Caan used in Alien Nation for his .454 revolver with the big scope on it. But no, I never heard of Wyoming Express, but it looks pretty interesting.
Well, Freedom Arms, I mean, they weren't they really the ones that came out with the .454 Casull? I mean, in terms of single action revolvers chambering it.
I believe they were one of the first. It was them, and I think Ruger had one at about the same time. But it was all in single action for a little while before the double action guys started picking them up.
Right, and I mean they only make a few models of single action revolver, but you can pretty much get them in any caliber you want. I'm looking on their website right now, and they have the Model 83 in 500 Wyoming Express, which retails for $2,534. A 475 Linbaugh, 454 Casull, 44 Magnum, 41 Magnum, and 357 Magnum. And they have them in various grades, field grade and premier grade. But then I also see them offering a rimfire. So they have them in 22 long rifle, and if I remember correctly, I saw them, I think they made the Model 97 in some weird calibers. They made like 224, 32 Freedom Arms, and 17 HMR. So they offer quite a wide range of calibers, not so many different guns, but definitely if you're looking into like silhouette shooting or handgun hunting, they're a pretty good choice.
Yep, and also you mentioned the huge load difference to it. That's another nice thing about revolvers is all you got to do is get that bullet out the end of the barrel. You don't need to worry about cycling in action or anything like that. So, I mean, you'll see like 500 Smith & Wesson, you'll see some boutique companies will build what they call 500 Smith & Wesson Special, which is essentially a low-pressure, fairly low-powered version of the 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum that isn't going to beat the crap out of you all day, but you still get to shoot your big, crazy revolver.
Well, one of the cool things I saw, I'm a huge fan of the powder Trail Boss for reloading, and I've seen a lot of people using Trail Boss for 500 Smith & Wesson loads. And they'll load like just a regular cast lead bullet with Trail Boss, which takes up a lot of that case space. Because I mean, if you were to use some of the faster burning smokeless powders, I mean, you're going to have quite a bit of space in that case.
Yeah, you don't want to do that with hand load. That's another. I mean, one thing you always think about is like double charges and overpressure loads and things like that with hand loading. But when you're dealing with these absolutely cavernous, cartridges, whether it be these great big revolver cartridges or if it's, your elephant gun type rifle cartridges, if you try to load them down too low, what can happen is the powder will settle down to the bottom of the cartridge case and essentially leave the flash hole unobstructed. And so when that primer touches off, the spark from the primer will actually ignite the powder in several different areas, and you can actually get detonation, which is just as dangerous as an overcharge. So again, follow your load books when if you want to load a much lighter cartridge thing. So you have nice, good, high volume, slow burning powder is a really, really good idea if you want to have a less punishing load.
Right. Well, I mean, that's the reason. Like, I've had people ask me, well, if 38 Special, why is it so long? Why is the case so long? I mean, there's only powder right in the bottom of the base of the cartridge case. And I was like, well, 38 Special originally was a black powder round. And to get the velocities they wanted, they needed that space because black powder, basically, you compress it. It has to be compressed. You can't leave airspace between the bottom of the bullet and the top of the powder. Yep. And when they switched to smokeless required much less, and it wasn't as sensitive to the whole airspace thing.
Yep. So also, you need to compress the load for black powder as well. So you essentially need to. I mean, that's why you see cowboy action shooters, because they want real light loads, taking stuff like cream of wheat or some other. Cream of wheat's what I usually see, is they'll load their cartridge up with black powder, but then they'll touch it off with some cream of wheat, which is just similar consistency as the black powder they're using, but it's inert. It's not going to be burning. What it's going to do is it's going to give a little extra volume for that bullet to compress against. But yeah, that goes up the line from all sorts of other cartridges, whether it be your 454 Casull, which is based off of 45 Colt, and so that's a black powder cartridge. So that cartridge tends to have a lot of airspace in it, and then for 454 Casull, it needs to be longer. That way, you can't stick it in your single action army and blow it up.
Right.
Also, same with the Smith & Wesson 460 Magnum. That's a 454 Casull lengthened out too. So, depending on how your load goes, you can have a lot of airspace in that case.
Right, and that's where Trail Boss really shines, because I mean, with a fairly light load, especially in something like 38 Special, I know it's filling up most of the case to the point where I don't have a huge amount of airspace, and if I were to do a double charge and I didn't catch it, it would overfill the case, and it would just be obvious. You couldn't see the bullet.
Yeah, no, I've usually loaded up my 38 Specials with, I think I was using red dot or blue dot, and that's a fairly low volume powder, and yeah, you got to be very, very careful that you just get that one charge in there.
The one that I'm always nervous about using is Bullseye. Bullseye is like explosive dust. So, moving on to the last cartridge here, and this one just blows me away, and I've never seen this in person, but now I want to after reading the specifications. So, this is the 500 Maximum, and I wish I had asked Hamilton Bowen last week about this, because I guess he was involved in the creation of this round. It's a 500 Limbaugh case that has been lengthened, and it was most often used in Hamilton Bowen's custom revolvers. It is one of the most powerful rounds that can be shot out of a handgun, propelling a 580 grain bullet at 1,202 feet per second in one load. So there was only a small number of custom-made 5-shot single-action revolvers chambering this, and I mean, this is a lengthened Limbaugh round, so you got to imagine this is probably a pretty long round. It needs a really long cylinder and window. But the grain weights run anywhere from 400 grain jacketed soft point at 1,407 feet per second, all the way up to that 580 grain bullet we were talking about at 1,200 feet per second. So that is just a massive round, and supposedly the guns manufactured for it have a barrel length of up to 6.5 inches with no muzzle brake or ports, which I'm not sure if those would even be a good idea. I haven't shot it yet, but maybe that would pretty much punish the people on the sides.
Yeah, it'd probably be okay. You'll have fun. Plus, if there's a charging elephant, you're not even going to feel the muzzle blast.
Oh, absolutely. That would be... I got to look on YouTube after the show is done to see if I can find some videos of that being shot, because I really want to see that now. So, Weird, you had one entry on here, black powder pistols, so why don't you kind of develop that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what... Most black powder pistols, I mean, especially if you're talking the vintage types, they were mostly your 58 caliber or your 68 caliber, or some even went up to like 72 caliber and stuff like that. They were pretty huge caliber pistols. I mean, but they also were small bore, 38 caliber and smaller than that, depending on what you got. But the one I decided to put up there is something that I've got a real soft point. Is it's a it's essentially a lineage of pistols. There's all sorts of different odd ducks out there if you start looking up. But the one that I found that's actually currently in production is Pedersoli makes a Howdah pistol, and they make this one in a 50 caliber. And what was interesting is I was surprised it has a rifle barrel, two rifle barrels, and essentially this is kind of a double-barreled shotgun pistol sort of looking thing, and the lineage of it goes is that they were actually designed. Howdah is the basket that sits up on top of an elephant that you ride in, and allegedly, people, especially during the colonial periods of India, people would be riding around through the wildernesses of India on the back of an elephant in their Howdah, and I guess a tiger can pretty easily scale up the side of an elephant and grab a hold of the people and enjoy a nice snack, and so they invented these. Really, you can get off your two quick shots. Some of them even had 3 barrels, so you can get off your quick shots, and they're all real big bore, and a lot of them were 12 gauge and bigger, and they were sometimes they'd load them with a solid lead ball, other times they'd load them with bucking ball, but a tiger's climbing up the side of your elephant. You want something big and something you can get a couple of shots off with, Go ahead.
Well, those black powder guns, like I was looking today, I got the Cabela's fall catalog, and the black powder guns, the bore sizes were crazy on those. On the larger, like the Brown Bess rifle, it was like 78 caliber.
Oh yeah. I mean, you can only get so much muzzle velocity out of black powder, so they just had to keep making the balls bigger and bigger.
Right. But like these Howdah pistols, I've seen these fired, and they were shooting, I believe they were shooting a 454 Casull and then a Howdah pistol, and the Howdah pistol kicked massively more than the 454 when I saw one fired. I think it was the Pedersoli copy of it.
Yep. Yeah, but though these are really nice. I didn't actually look on the website to see how much they go for, but I don't think they're particularly cheap. They look like they're really well made.
They are pretty expensive, if I remember correctly. I think they were going for something like $600.
Yeah, I still want one. And I want one for though. I want to be able to load that up with buck and ball.
They do make. I know they make one. They do a short barrel shotgun sawed off because I believe since it's black powder, it doesn't fall under the NFA.
It's not if it's loose black powder, it's not a firearm, so it doesn't fall under anything. So you can mail order them, have it delivered to your door.
The other cool thing is on the Pedersoli website, they're also offering a stock that attaches to that Howdah pistol.
Yep.
So and that's also legal because it's a black powder gun.
Yep, not a firearm. But of course, that's also now that we're talking NFA rules, that's one of those fun ways to get yourself a nice time in federal prison is you can buy something like a Colt Dragoon or a Remington cap and ball or anything like that. You can get the shoulder stock for it, and then you can turn around and get a cartridge conversion cylinder where it's got 6 little firing pins inside the cylinder, and that cylinder is actually the serialized firearm. And as soon as you put that into your gun with a shoulder stock attached, unless you filed the paperwork for a short-barreled rifle, you're now in possession of an unregistered short-barreled rifle. Not a smart move, so be careful with that.
Definitely, and I've seen some people encounter problems with that with the Browning high powers and the Mauser pistols, the C96, because some of them are exempt because they're antiques, but some of them aren't, and they're very specific on the ATF website in terms of which ones, which production years are exempt. So if you are thinking about doing that, just as a little side note, make sure you double check that.
I think the rules are if it's CNR eligible, it's exempt. It's CNR eligible, and the stock needs to be original to the unit that you're buying. It doesn't necessarily have to be serialized identical, but it's one of those. If you're getting, a 1940s era high power, you need to have a 1940s era high power shoulder stock, and then you're okay. But possibly if you've got another high power kicking around in your collection, I've definitely heard of people that had one legal gun that could set up for that, and another gun that wasn't, and that was the constructive
possession.
Yeah, constructive possession, which is of course one of the dumber laws because I happen to also have down here in the armory. I also happen to have my wife's tool bench, and on the tool bench there's a hacksaw. So yeah, no, I could just start hacking the barrels off all my rifles and suddenly get short-barreled rifles in a few minutes. Is that constructive possession?
Right. No, it's always better to check with your local legal advice person for that, local lawyer or something, before you go about doing any of that, because the ATF doesn't take kindly to, oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
So that about wraps up our main topic discussion on 50 caliber pistols. So we're going to head into the wrap-up section. So don't forget to shop Brownells using our affiliate link, handgunradio.com/Brownells. And be sure to go over to Handgun Radio on Facebook and like it and share it with your friends. And also leave us a review on iTunes. It helps the show in the iTunes standings and helps it get noticed. And be sure to listen to all the great shows on the Firearms Radio Network, including Fat to Fit HQ with Carol. She does a great job over there, so go check that out. There is a link in the show notes. And be sure to visit the Firearms Insider for reviews and SHOT Show 2014 coverage. And also, if you're interested in writing reviews for the Firearms Insider, please email TJ at tj@firearmsradio.tv. So, Weer'd Beard, thanks a lot for coming on and being part of the 50th episode of Handgun Radio.
It's exciting, man. 50 episodes, 50 caliber.
2 more weeks, and it'll be a full year of shows. So, where can people find you? You
can find me at my personal blog, which is weirdworld.com. Or you can listen to me every Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Squirrel Report, sqrpt.com.
Excellent. There'll be links to both those in the show notes. So that about wraps up this week. So until next week, have fun and safe shooting.